The box design pays homage to the original NES box as it existed in the late 80s and early 90s. Retro blast from the past. The Nintendo Classics logo on top of the box suggests there might be more systems along these lines coming soon. If you don't look closely, you might think this is just a photo of a regular NES. But it ain't everything that comes in the box. Not much, when you get down to it. Warnings printed on the underside, an ICA screw to possibly get into the controller ports. Just 2 ports on the back. Couldn't be simpler, unless there was one port. Even the miniaturized NES 101, released late in the console's first life, is a bit bigger than the Classic Edition. A nice retro-styled poster that comes in the package. On the back of the poster are all the instructions you'll need to set the system up. The only apparent difference between the Classic Edition controller top and a real NES controller is decades of wear and tear. This photo should give you some idea of the extent to which the Classic Edition controller right has a cord that is much too short. Back in April, when Nintendo discontinued the hot ticket NES Classic Edition after just 6 months on the market, it prompted us to suggest in a headline that Nintendo hates money. Someone at Nintendo must have figured out that money is good, though, because Nintendo announced this morning that the $60 plug-and-play retro console will be coming back to retailers next summer. Nintendo promised more details in the future and didn't provide any explanation as to why we'll have to wait through an entire fall, winter, and spring before more NES Classic units are available. Component shortages seem to be a likely culprit. The Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils-Aimé recently told the Financial Times about the challenge of managing a complex global supply chain, especially when it comes to bottlenecks on multiple Switch components. With the pending Super NES Classic Edition likely using similar components to the NES Classic, producing both systems at once could complicate that supply chain even further. As Fils-Aimé put it a time after the NES Classic's initial discontinuation, "We've got a lot going on right now and we don't have unlimited resources." While the NES Classic Edition's return is welcome news for those who missed out on the system's initial 2.3 million unit run, it might be disappointing to those who paid high eBay markups or invested in pricey ThinkGeek bundles to get their hands on the system. The pending return could also be bad news for Chinese bootleggers that have flooded the market with fake NES Classic consoles to help satisfy demand. As for the Super NES Classic Edition, Nintendo for the first time today committed to producing the system into 2018, rather than cutting off units at the end of the calendar year as previously announced. The company promised that the September 29 launch would see more units of the Super NES Classic than the NES Classic saw all last year, with subsequent shipments arriving in stores regularly. For context, the NES Classic sold 1.5 million units through January of 2017, and the bulk of those systems likely ship before the end of 2016. That means we could easily see more than 1 million Super NES Classic units on store shelves on day one, a launch that would rival the likes of the Xbox One and the PS4. That probably won't be enough to fully satisfy what Nintendo acknowledges is unbridled enthusiasm for these Classic Edition systems, but it at least provides people with a better chance of finding one on store shelves at a local retailer. Speaking to FD last week, Fils-Aimé had promised a dramatic increase in Super NES Classic production, and he tried to tamp down a feeding frenzy among second-hand resellers. "I would strongly urge you not to overbid on an SNES Classic on any of the auction sites," Fils-Aimé told the paper. "You shouldn't have to pay more than $79.99. Reading between the lines, it seems plausible that Nintendo will crank out as many Super NES Classic Editions as it comes through next spring, at which point it will start to wind things down to ramp up production facilities toward the summer relaunch of the NES Classic. Regardless of the specifics, Nintendo's public stance suggests the company has finally fully accepted the huge interest in its classic system line and is reconfiguring its resources to help satisfy that interest.